Before you invest in another property and spend £50,000, 100k, or even more, I want to explain to you why this video exists. Because most investors fail. Because they're stupid, because they don't understand what they're stepping into. Property is simple, it's not easy, and there's a big difference between them two. Over the last few years, we've personally built and managed millions of pounds worth of property. We've structured joint ventures. We've ran multiple refurbs at once. We've also personally seen what happens when you don't have the structure there. And the pattern is all the same. They're either misunderstanding the funds, they are scared of risk, or they misunderstand and don't execute properly. And those are three things is either where money is made or destroyed. This isn't a pitch. I'm not here to try and convince you of anything. I'm here to give you guys some clarity. As if you're going to invest some serious money, you need to understand how serious operators think. I'm going to break down structure that most investors never see. How to deploy capital, how to control your risk, weird K, and why most investors in execution, where most investors quietly lose profits. This isn't a get rich quick scheme. There's no hype here, no fluff, no social media BS. This is the exact how we do it, and you potentially should do too. Over the past few years, I've noticed something very consistent. There's a pattern, and it always starts with one of these three things. As if you've got 0 or you've got 5 properties, they always land in one of these three different categories. You've got capital, you've got execution, and you've got risk. Let's start off with capital. Most people think they haven't got enough money to start. They think you need a boatload of money to start investing in property. But in reality, they need more structure. That is a very different thing. You could have one person with £70,000 and do nothing. You can have one person that's got £70,000 and they invest because they've got structure. When it comes to risk, this is one people never really admit to. It used to be us. People say they're waiting for the right deal or the market's not the right time, so on and so forth. However, in reality, they're saying, what if I lose money? What if planning permission gets not accepted if it was for a bigger project, as an example? What if the refurb, let me rewrite that one. What if the refurb isn't correct? What about the interest rates currently? Don't get me wrong, these are all valid reasons, but experts don't completely eliminate risk. They'll take calculated risk. That there is a massively huge difference. They will break down the risk, weigh up the rewards, and as long as they've got systems in place, they will take that risk. Third, execution is where even where experienced investors lose money. They understand the strategy, they know what a BRR is, they've consumed the content, but execution is where a deal either succeeds or collapses. It's timing refinances correctly. It's getting lender appetite on a property before even committing it. It's securing lending on the back end before even purchasing it. It's stress testing lending. It's stress testing the exit on the back end. It's coming up with a plan before committing a single penny. This is where most investors quietly get wrong. If you're watching this, you're probably in one of these three categories. That's normal, but it's not permanent. Because once you understand how serious players play the game and how they understand capital, how they know how to manage risk, and the details of how to execute a deal correctly, the game changes. So let's break this down. Most investors focus on strategy, HMO, serviced accommodation, or SA for short, BRR. But Where people get it wrong is they're missing where the structure is. But professionals focus on structure, because strategy without structure, it's not strategy, it's gambling. This is a real framework, not a simplified version. You don't buy property, you buy upside, you buy below market value, you add value to the property. Or you buy upside. You don't just buy property, you buy below market value, you buy upside, and you force up the capital appreciation. There's many ways to increase value. These are a few ways. You can lay out and make it more optimized. You can uplift the value of the property through planning. As an example, we bought a pub which we're converting into 13 apartments, so that's a mixture of both of them. Well, a mixture of 3 of them. Also, bedroom count increase. Buying properties without measurable upside is speculation. Buying properties with structure is investing. Add value, but add calculated value, not emotional value. This is where amateurs go like that, and investors who are professional go like that. You don't add value to a property to make it look all amazing and for aesthetics. You add value for the valuation. Valuation, rent, and the exit appeal. Everything is done backwards from the refinance. You need to work backwards to figure out the goal. We've had projects where the layout changes. We've created more uplift than higher spec finishers ever would. Measured improvements beat emotional upgrades. Refinancing, this is where you seriously grow. If your money is tied up, you're stuck and you're not scaling. Refinancing, it allows your money, let me draw a little bag of money. How am I going to do this? Hey, that looks good. It allows your money to recycle over and over again to compound and scale. We can build a portfolio starting with original 100 grand and scale it and keep adding value. And then years down the line, that pot of money is birthed so much more. Buy a rundown property, do it up, change the layout, add more bedrooms in there, however it may be. 6 months, 12 months, 18 months down the line, depending on the project. Refinance, get the majority of your money back, and go again. While you're waiting now, get a tenant in there, or a guest, or a commercial tenant, however the property is run, and they will pay the mortgage, and you will also be left with a portion of cash flow. So not only will your original pot of money be back, you'll also be getting cash flow from this property. That isn't luck, that's planning the exit before you even buy the property. Tenant structure. Here's now where stability will come in. You can have students, if it wants to draw. There we go. You can have students that increase yield. You can have professionals that increase stability. You can have hospital staff members that can increase demand and cash flow. However, though, this depends on your risk appetite. Higher yields normally mean higher cash flow and higher volatility. Lower yields would bring obviously less volatility but also less cash flow. You don't just buy blindly, in what I'm trying to say to you. You buy depending on your risk. Once you then got a proven model that works for you, you repeat. One thing which we do personally though, depending on, of course, your risk appetite, we like to be diversified. Instead of just saying we're only going to have this, what's stopping us from having, let's say, 10% of this? Let's say this was the most stable, where we've got 60% in that, and then we've got 30% in this. Personally, that number all depends on you. We can't answer that for you. That depends on what you're doing now, your lifestyle, if you've got people to support and people as obviously as a bigger family. That depends on you. This is how portfolios grow into a big group. But it looks easy and simple on a whiteboard. Really, the execution is not that simple. The planning stage is where most investors underestimate, and where they lose money. Because every single stage needs to be fully bulletproof planned before a single penny gets spent. Zero risk. If anyone says to you there's such a thing as zero risk in property, they don't know what they're saying. They've got no experience. But risk is manageable. For example, planning permission. Most investors are absolutely terrified that planning won't get accepted. However, before even completing on the property, a full feasibility test needs to be done. Speaking to the local planning department, having a plan A, B, and C. Let's say, for example, there was a 7-bed HMO property. So we've got a 6-bedroom property and then got a 7. If you're not familiar, to convert a property from a normal house, you need to get plan permission to turn it into a 7. However, worst case scenario, as a backup, is plan B. What are the numbers looking like as a 6-bed? Do they still stack? If they completely tank and you cannot afford to take the risk as a 6, it's not a good investment. Worst case scenario, let's say even if you didn't have permission to run it as a HMO and you need to get the license, there we go, the license for the HMO, what are the numbers looking like if it was an Airbnb? The numbers looking like if it was social housing? The numbers looking like if it was a normal residential property? Refurb risks. People always ask, and they're scared, what happens if the refurb overruns? Luckily for you, we offer fixed price quote contracts, meaning if there's an unforeseen cost, pipes overdue on the time frame of the property, or the roof flew off in the middle of a tornado and it goes, that cost is absorbed by us, not the investor. And these is where profits are protected. Tenants. There's always a risk also with tenants. What happens if I have void periods in the properties? I've got voids, I've got damages, I've got legal costs of having to take them to court. All of these are legit worries and risk, but they are still manageable. First, you got tenant referencing, income checks, credit checks, all to make sure that they've obviously got references and you're going to get a good tenant in there. Regarding damages, obviously there's deposits, there's insurances for tenants also. There's also insurances for this. And one of the big things is demand checks. When you go to buy the property, of course, you're going to be looking at it as, let's say it was needed planning, you're going to look at the planning risk, you're going to look at the refurb risk, you're going to look at the tenant risk. Obviously, of course, with that, there'll be subcategories such as the demand in the area. We've got properties that have got great demands, but it's more of a lower class area. With that property, of course, we are expecting more damages. We're going to be expecting more void periods. We're not going to be doing the refurb to a £500,000 standard because, of course, we're not going to get there with the value of the property, and we're going to have an issue with this. I know you're probably going to be asking, what type of insurances do I then get? One of the main ones which we personally use is something called Vouch. I tell you what, these are great, but we need to be getting a commission because we've sent so many people to these. As an example, what these cover in our portfolio, because we've got over 100 units in our portfolio, what these cover are things such as damages in the property. They will pay us directly and get their own handyman out there and get it, I think it's 48 hours to get it sorted in. So they'll do that for us. Let's say worst case scenario, there was void periods in the property, and due to all the new tenant rights that are coming in, trying to screw landlords over, they were in there for 6 months not paying us rent. Vouch will pay us 90% of the rent which we have missed. I think it's up to a year or 2 years. They will also, in the meantime, take them to court for us doing all of that. Of course, there's still risk with everything. All of these stuff don't eliminate the risk, but it does massively put a downside on it. Risk is layered. You've got to go through the different layers and you've got to get rid of all the different potential points that you are at risk at. You've got to cover your flanks ready before you go over the trenches. Big risk. What people always miss out on is the exit, which I probably think this is the biggest, especially when you're wanting to go down the route of BRR. People finish a refurb, then they go to a lender and go, hi, can I have now a mortgage on this property? No, 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 no. Always get the appetite of the lender before you commit on the property. We know people that have bought a property below market value. They've done it up and the refurb's been on budget, in time frame, etc. All going great. They could not then get a mortgage on the property. Their £200,000, which they invested, which they were planning to scale and over the next 5 years generate into 10 to 15 properties, went completely down the drain because that 200k was tied up into this property. So they went from 15 properties in that 5 years to only owning one. This especially comes in when you're looking to buy a property on a bridge. If people don't know what a bridging loan is, a bridging loan is basically a short-term loan. So you can go to the bank and say, hi, it allows you to buy a property as if you were a cash investor. So let's say this property here, before it was refurbed, was completely run down, there was chunks off it and it was on fire. Completely unmortgageable. But you can still buy it with a bridging loan. You may have to put down 30% of the property. Let's say the loan to value on this rundown property is 70% loan to value. If you're looking to buy that for £200,000, so we're looking to buy that, we've got £200,000 cash, we're looking to buy that. So if we wanted to buy that with a bridging loan, we'd have to put down, obviously, 30%, so that would be £60,000, plus stamp duty, plus legals. We were in it for, let's say, 80k, easy maths. Then let's say the refurb was the additional 120k, plus 120. So we're in this property for 200. The value on the back end was 350, 300, whatever it would be. Amazing, the numbers sound great. We're going to pull out the majority of our money and go again. We can't get a mortgage on the back end. Let's say that was potentially due to credit. That was potentially due to having overseas investors structured in the company. It was potentially due to not having prior experience with commercial property. The list goes on of what it could potentially be. We're in a very awkward situation, especially if you use a bridging loan. One of the biggest misconceptions in property: you need more cash to obviously acquire a bigger portfolio, more capital. That's completely not true. It's required that you need better structure. Prime example, we had an investor called John. John came to us with roughly around £70,000. He was wanting to invest that in a small buy-to-let property. His return on that property would have been around about 5 years' time. Not a bad investment. Great for parking your money up. However, we structured it for him to scale it to a bigger deal. We use bridging finance for speed. We add immeasurable value to a property by adding more rooms, which changes use class with planning. We were able to refinance that, pull out the majority of the original capital, getting him an overall better ROI. By using the different strategies, we were able to 10x what he would have got there to here. Of course, there was risk involved, but with the structure of the plan and the structure of what he had available to him, we ended up achieving his goal a lot quicker. Bridging finance is often misunderstood. It's risky when you enter a deal emotionally. Another thing that we personally use alongside bridging is development finance. Development finance is basically, in a nutshell, let's say you have a refurbishment and it is £100,000 for this refurbishment. Traditionally, they won't touch anything smaller than that. So it all depends on the lender and criteria, etc. But let's use this as an example. Let's say you wanted to buy this property you have enough to buy it and put down the deposit on the bridge, but you haven't got an additional £100,000 for the refurb. Depending on the deal, the bank will give you development finance for it, and also depending on the build team. The build team needs to be a qualified build team. You can't have John from down the street coming to do the property for you, because the bank is, in a way, they're invested in the deal, invested in you, and probably 80% the build team. So what would happen is they will do it in something called tranches. So depending on the lender, let's keep it easy. This lender hypothetically will do 4 installments. So they do 4 different breakdowns of 25k each. So when each stage gets up to, we will have to reimburse the 25. So we would originally put down the first 25k. Let's say that got us to rip out. They would send a member of their team out to have a look of the property. Then they will reimburse us that 25k. Then we would then go again with that 25k, so on and so forth until the refurb is finished. This allows us to buy properties with not needing to have the full amount of money. Some of our big developments are £600,000 total money in, but we can buy them with anywhere from 100 to 150 pounds, 100 to 150,000 pounds, depending on the deal. So of course, by leveraging the banks, it's great. This is more of a comfort for you as an investor, is having a second opinion. The bank will not lend unless they are confident in the deal. When we originally started using bridge and development finance, it was so scary. However, well, it's like having another silent partner in there that is double check the numbers, double check the area, double check the exit, because they will not lend you the money if they aren't confident that they are going to get it back. So realistically, it's not about not having enough. It all circles back to the correct structure. However, you need to come up with first a plan. It's not about not having enough. Now you understand the underlying issue is the structure. The underlying issue is the structure. Investing without this is just gambling. It would be better for you to go to Las Vegas, put it on red or black, depending on what you want to do. You probably understand, and you can probably see right now, structure and the execution isn't glamorous whatsoever, due to it being the so-called boring work. This is where most people mess up and lose money. You need to have the structure all lined up.